one? You? These guys, they write more fair stories than most of you guys, so thank you for being here. They do. Now, I don't know if it'll last that way forever, but you guys have done a pretty good job covering things, so you get a bad rap. But you actually are pretty fair, you know, so I give you credit. Well, people think that you're funded by Democrats, but you're actually very fair. So I give you credit. So that's why we welcome you here, Michigan Advance. It's a great publication for now. We'll see how it is the next 2 years. Thanks for being here. Everyone ready? No Skubik?
I'm Skubik today.
You're Skubik? Well, tell the dean of the Capitol Press Corps I said hi. We think very highly of his work, and you know, Rick Albin, there must be something else going on somewhere more important. Rick Albin's not here. He's probably the best reporter in the Capitol Press Corps. He's great. But anyway, it's great to be here with you today with Tom Kunse, who's a great member of our caucus, and Donni Steele, who's our leader on transportation funding for the caucus, you know, our ranking member on the Transportation Appropriations Committee. And so we've been working together along with Pat Altman, who is our transportation policy lead for the House Republicans. And it was nice, you know, it was nice the Democrats had to work on Friday, wasn't it? We put out a press release at 8:30 a.m. on Friday announcing a roads plan. And I'll tell you, you know, I was reading the stories, and they say, they're equating our position to the Democrats' position. This is before the press release went out. And, you know, we were in these scrums, and I was telling you the details of our transportation plan, what I realized is I just need to put it out in writing so you all could see it. So we did. We put it out in writing, the whole plan in a press release, and then Tom said, you know what, maybe we should have a press conference too to answer questions. So we're going to do that here today. I thought that was a good idea. So, we have, Tom will be introducing very soon some of our plan, which is great. And there's some other bills out there already that could be used to implement it. So that's on the way. But I'll just point out a few things. Number one, our school aid fund is up $8 billion over the last 10 years, which is more than 60%. And I'm going to argue to you that all of these numbers are much higher than inflation. We know that under Biden and Whitmer, inflation is up, but it's not up 60% like the school aid fund. Our general fund is up $4.3 billion since 2018, which is more than 40%, also more than inflation. That's quite a bit. And I just want you to know that government is growing, and I think you've done a pretty good job of pointing this out. No one has said what their lame duck priorities are. Do you notice that? You ask Tate, he won't say. You ask Brinks, she won't say. So I just thought, why don't we put this out here? We were planning on doing this next year when we're in majority, but I thought, well, if there's no one with lame duck priorities, we'll just put this out and let's focus on the roads, because a lot of the conversation the last few weeks has been about giving money to corporations. And I started realizing, and our caucus started realizing, if we give all the money to corporations, there's a road funding cliff coming. And some of you have reported very well on this, that the federal money is running out from the Biden administration, and the borrowing is running out. Remember, the governor borrowed billions of dollars, and almost all of that went to MDOT roads and federal roads. So what we're seeing when we talk to our local people in our communities, whether they're mayors or township officials or county road commissions, they're telling us there's no money that's been going into our local roads. Our local roads are in disrepair. So what we propose is, kind of flipping this formula a little bit, and for this new money, making sure it goes to our local county roads, our local city roads, our village roads, flipping it so more of it goes to those places, because that's where the need is. I think someone on my staff told me it was, 30 lane miles? Is that what the number was? Was it 30 lane miles of local roads? Is that right, Jerry?
Yeah, 30 miles extra a few years ago.
Yeah, that's how much extra local and county roads got funded under all this bonding, right, and all this spending. So that's where the need is. I mean, I talked to Greg Markkinen today. He said there's a road up in his district that hasn't been redone since the 1950s. If you think about that, up in Copper Harbor, he says 1 million people use that a year. So I'm just saying it's our county and local roads that need the help. So we said, before we give the money to all the corporations, and by the way, how many candidates campaigned on that? How many candidates said, vote for me, I'm going to give all your money to tear down the Renaissance Center in Detroit? Or give me your money, I'm going to give it to these corporations that lay off people in our state? Versus how many said, vote for me and I'll fix the roads? And we've had Whitmer for 6 years, and since the 45-cent gas tax increase, which no legislative Democrat had the guts to introduce, we've not seen a plan from them. And so for 6 years, other than the borrowing, a lot of people in Lansing have allowed the Democrats to get away with no plan. So I said, you know what? We've been there a week or two as the speaker-elect. We'll just put a plan out. It's not that hard. Let's put the plan out. Let's set the corporations off to the side. Let's take this 40% bigger general fund and 60% bigger school aid fund, which we're going to hold harmless. So don't write stories about cutting school aid and cutting schools, because it says in the press release, we're going to hold it harmless. If you guys want to talk about the general fund, that's fine. We can talk about the general fund, but it's not fair to say we're going to cut schools. And you look at Democrats, all they say, even though it's not going to cut schools, we want to invest in schools. The priority should be roads, education, public safety. What they do is the opposite. They say, let's not fund those things like roads. Let's give all the money to corporations, and you all have done a great job writing about these earmarks that they spend their money on. And I said, so they want to spend it on that, and then next year I believe they're going to come to you and say, hey, we don't have any money left. Let's raise taxes to pay for the roads. So our thing is, let's pay for the roads now, and then if they want to raise taxes, they can make the case to the people of Michigan. Let's raise taxes to tear down the Renaissance Center and bail out GM. Let's raise taxes to bring other corporations to our state. Let's raise taxes for boxing rings and to give money to nonprofits that haven't even existed yet. And let's raise taxes to fund a hip hop academy in Lansing, and all these ideas they have. If the people support them on that, great. But let's not make our roads the last priority. Let's make it the first priority. So that's why we put this plan out. I think it's a good plan. You just take the corporate income tax and you dedicate that to roads, right? And then you can fight in the general fund about all this new expansion in government and all these earmarks. I think the politicians have too much discretionary money. And I used to think that was a good thing, but then I saw how they spent it, and I said, no, that needs to be dedicated to roads. So you look at that, and then I would just say we're going to backfill school aid. I'll just name a few things, and I'm sure you guys will have a lot of questions, but I'm just going to give you a few examples, okay? You could dedicate income tax revenue to backfill schools. I mean, you could just do that. You could deal with all of these restricted funds. A lot of these restricted funds go way over what they need and what they spend. So you could dedicate some of the money from all of those restricted funds to backfill schools. You could look into the $8 billion of work projects that are just sitting around squirreled away in government and start saying, could we spend some of that money to backfill schools? You could say, let's dedicate in a negotiation some of the CIT revenue I'm talking about. You could dedicate that to backfill schools. There are a lot of things you could do to backfill schools, and I've told you that our plan is going to hold schools harmless. I've told you all that in my press release, and I'm telling you here again today. So this is not about cutting schools. So let's set that off to the side for a second. This conversation really needs to be about how the general fund is up 40%, and what are they spending it on? And when they come to you and say, the general fund's up 40%, the governor campaigned on fixing the roads, and then they come to you and say, we spent a $9 billion surplus last year, we don't have any of it left, and we still need money for our local roads. Why would anyone believe that? No one should believe that. If roads was the priority, they could have funded it out of this 40% increase or out of that $9 billion surplus, but they didn't. They didn't fund it on local roads. So we're just saying, let's flip this. Let's just dedicate the money to the things the people want, and then they can go fight about the less popular things and make their case, and some of it will get funded and some of it won't. I'll just say we're open to negotiations with Democrats. I mean, we're going to need Democrats to get this plan done. So there's a lot of things I laid out. There's even more ways we could backfill school aid. We'll engage with the governor, we'll engage with Tate and Brinks, and we'll figure out exactly which one of those options or other options would backfill schools. But I'm telling you, both in the press release and now, schools will be made whole as part of this. This is not about cutting schools. This is about spending our general fund smart. So I'll turn it over to questions in a sec, but I didn't know, is there anything either of you want to add, or you want to just wait for questions?
Yeah, questions.
All right, great. Well, we'll go from there. Oh boy. Did Scuba give you this question?
You did.
Oh, good. I can't wait.
Are you disappointed that the governor hasn't introduced her own legislative solution for this issue?
That's a great question. The answer is yes. I mean, the governor's had 6 years, and I think that some people have been giving her a pass on the fact that you can't equate a position of, yes, I want to fix roads, or yes, I will have discussions about fixing roads. You can't equate that position with here are the details of how we do it. Those are not, you can't equate those things. I'm giving you the details. It's great people are going to pick it apart and make it better and refine it, and we'll have negotiations and conversations, but I have a plan and the Democrats don't. And so they could just adopt our plan and we could work together, we could solve this, it'd be great. So I'm hopeful they'll embrace our plan. And, you know, their criticism sharpens it and makes it better. And we could come up with something really good for the people of Michigan. How nice would it be if we ended this year with a roads plan that funded our roads fully and people could have confidence that their local roads were going to be fixed? People would love that. That'd be a great thing. So, yeah, I wish the governor would have done it, but you know what? They elected House Republican leadership to a majority, and we're stepping up, and this is going to be our top priority, both in lame duck and if they don't do it in lame duck next year.
Without raising taxes.
Do you hear that?
I did.
Without raising taxes.
You're in the mic? Why don't you?
Oh, I'm just really excited about this plan. I've been on the appropriations for 2 years, and we have a shortage of the funding from the driveways to the highways, and that is a promise that I would like to really fulfill, and to do this without raising taxes. That's what I'm so excited about this plan, is being able to just do it by better budgeting. So that's what I'm really excited about. So thanks for doing this today.
That's great. You know, Donnie's the lead on that committee for a reason, and it's good that she's putting the marker down on that we're not going to support a tax increase to do it. Great point.
Leader Hall, how many yes votes do you think you have in your caucus for a revenue increase on roads?
Well, we're not going to do a revenue increase on roads because I think probably zero. I'll just answer your question direct. I would say zero, because if we went back to our caucus and said the general fund is up 40% since 2018, which is $4.3 billion. Do you guys think we should spend this money on, electric school buses and a Zen stone for the Novi Public Schools and boxing rings and giving it to GM to tear down the Renaissance Center and raise taxes to do it? Or do you think we should just try to find it from that $4.3 billion? I think all 58 of our incoming members would probably say, why don't we just spend it out of the general fund? And then once we dedicate it, because you don't want the politicians to come back later and take it away. Dedicate it. And then if there are reasons to raise taxes, let's evaluate those ideas. And then if there's a really good, compelling case to raise taxes, then maybe some of our members would go for it. But they're not going to go for it to fund the stuff these guys have been spending it on the last 2 years.
Can I
Yeah, go
expand
ahead.
just a little bit
Go
on
ahead.
that? Just a little bit on that. So we are revenue neutral, and the bills that I'm going to introduce later today, LSB has them, we're going to do some later today, is going to raise the gas tax, but we're going to lower the sales tax an equivalent amount. So we are not raising. This is revenue neutral. So even though there's going to be an adjustment, it's not a new tax. Be really clear on that. Revenue neutral.
And that's a great point, just to add. So we're going to make sure all of the money that you spend at the pump goes to roads. Now, in the studies I've seen, they say pretty universally that Michigan has one of the higher amounts of taxes collected at the pump, and one of the lower percentages of that money that goes to roads across the states, roughly. So our plan is just dedicate all of the money that goes to roads, our plan is dedicate all of the money that we collect at the pump to roads. Just dedicate it all. And then, and the way you do that is what Tom Kunse is introducing, and he's got a great plan to do it. And so we'll do that, and then we'll backfill the schools. And that makes sense. I think it makes sense to people. If you're charged for it at the pump, it should go to fixing the roads. The fact that there's a disconnect there doesn't make a lot of sense. It's basically a user fee for using roads. So we want to make sure that that happens, and you're making sure of it, Tom. You're doing a great job. Yes.
In 2019, when the governor proposed the 45-cent gas tax increase, one of the counter proposals from House Republicans at that time was exactly what you're saying, moving the sales tax they pay at the pump directly to roads. That didn't succeed in 2019. Why do you think it has a better chance this time around?
Well, I was there, you remember, so I was there, and so I can speak to this. what you've seen since then is an explosion in the general fund. I mean, it's a 40% increase in the general fund approximately since that time. So I think all of us look at it and say, we don't want to cut important services. We don't want to cut education. You want to have a responsible budget. But where I think they lost credibility is the budget went up 40% in the general fund, and we didn't see additional investments in local and county roads. So then you start to say, okay, the governor campaigned on fix the roads. That isn't the priority. The priority is whatever they spent that other 40% on. And so we look at, government did not, the state didn't need all these programs before 2018, and some of it just a year or two ago. I mean, we survived fine without that. Now, we go back, we evaluate all of those programs, and we look for return on investment for taxpayers. So some of those new programs Whitmer's put in there have merit. One thing people talk about in school aid is the free breakfast, free lunch, right? That has merit, okay? But we look at the programs that have been there for 50 years. Do those have as much merit as they used to? Do all of the new programs they created have merit? Or when you're setting priorities in a budget, you have to draw a line somewhere. I'm just saying that line, roads should be above that line, and some of these other things should be below that line. And if the people think we should fund the things below the line, they can make a case for a tax increase on that. But that's not what they do. They fund all that stuff, and then next year they'll try to come to you and say, raise taxes for roads. And that doesn't make any sense when you have had a 40% growth in your general fund since that time. So my hope is that everyone, Republican or Democrat, can look at what's happened since that time and say, you know what, we got the money to do this. That's what's different.
One other follow-up question. It seems like this plan would cut off the funding stream for SOAR going forward. I guess, what's your opinion of the program? Or do you think it's better off without any funding going toward it? Or do you think that funding can be found in other ways?
Well, I think that every program, they can make their case. The governor and the MEDC can make their case to the legislature. And just like what happened before the automatic funding was put in on a pretty much party line vote, there may have been one Republican, but it was pretty much party line vote. Before that, they could just make their case and say, entire legislature, this is what we're trying to do, and with no NDAs, this is what we're trying to do, so the public can view it, the legislature can view it, and say, let's get the votes to do it, and we'll appropriate the money for those projects that have merit. Instead of what they're doing now, which is we're going to automatically dedicate hundreds of millions of dollars to this, and then a select group of legislators that is very stacked get a voice, right? So what you've seen in this legislature is they put all the pro-economic development, corporate welfare members on a probes, and what, probably 80% of the members don't get a vote on it? Every community should be represented in those votes, and if they're such great projects for the state, then they'll pass the House, they'll pass the Senate, and the governor will sign it. But they need to make that case on the individual projects, not in secret and not with a select group of members. So, yes, that fund should expire after it expires. I think it's scheduled to expire after this next year. It should expire after that, and that money will go back to roads. Because remember, these are all competing interests. I mean, wouldn't it be great if we could do everything? But we can't. We have to set priorities. That's what this government has been missing the last 2 years especially. I'm just saying roads is a higher priority than giving the money to corporations. Who needs it more? Right? I would say the people need it for roads more than the corporations need it, many of which have had record years. I mean, GM is way up there, billions of dollars of profit, but they want $250 million from us to tear down the Renaissance Center as they've left Detroit and just laid off 1,000 people in Warren. Does GM need it more, or does your local county need it more? That's the question that we have to make an answer to here very soon.
You mentioned the rent cent
Yeah.
multiple times. GM and Bedrock today unveiled a $1.6 billion plan, which about 15% would be
lot of that state, maybe 250 million. So are you explicitly against 250 million for that plan?
Well, number one, I think it's great that there's proposals out there to, redevelop and improve the river walk. And, in my office, I have one of those placards that says, "Make Detroit Great Again." You guys remember that from the Trump rally at the Ren Center? Or it wasn't at the Ren Center, it was at the Cobo. What do they call Cobo now?
Little Caesars?
TCF. They
Oh,
keep
TCF.
changing the name. Huntington Place? Huntington Place?
Place.
Yeah, sorry. How many times have they changed the name? I mean, so many times. But a lot of us still call it Cobo. But anyway, at the Trump rally there, they had those "Make Detroit Great Again" signs. And I have one of those in my office. It has a beautiful silhouette of Detroit, including the Renaissance Center. But we want Detroit to be great. We do. And many of us have voted for things that have helped Detroit, right? Including myself. We've done it over and over and over again. Many people think Detroit's actually better off under Republican leadership than they are under the current House leadership. But I'll just say with that, so I think it's great that they want to improve Detroit. I think it's great that they want to figure out how to utilize some of that area. I'm just saying, if GM is leaving Michigan, which I'll just say they're definitely leaving Detroit, because remember, I read in one of your stories, I think it was your story, there were 6,000 people working in that Renaissance Center from GM before the pandemic. And then now they're moving into 2 floors in that in the Hudson building. And then last week they said they're laying off 1,000 workers, many of those in Warren. And then I read in one of your stories, now they're blaming Trump too. They're saying, because of Trump, there'll be more layoffs at GM, right? So they're the ones leaving Michigan and leaving Detroit. So wouldn't it be a great part of GM's legacy to just pay to tear down the building and redevelop it? I mean, how insulting is it to the taxpayers that these guys say, we're leaving Detroit and we want you guys to pay to tear down the building on our way out? That is insulting. So, why don't they pay for it? And if they believe that's what they want to do instead of filling up that building, I mean, what a great thing it would be for GM to do for Detroit if they just paid for it.
Given that a substantial portion of this funding model is relying on gas consumption, is this a gamble that electric vehicles aren't going to become more popular in the future?
Well, first of all, I think the gamble was what the Biden administration and the Whitmer administration did, spending hundreds of millions and billions of our tax dollars on these electric vehicle plans. I mean, I remember once looking at this and saying, well, I sure hope this works, because they're betting the entire future of Michigan on electric vehicles. You look at every one of those deals they made, and I was part of the GM deal, right? I voted for the GM deal. We wanted to keep GM in Michigan. We did. I just didn't know that every other proposal after that was going to be an electric battery plant. You know what I mean? And you see Goshen, and I read stories in all your papers about, what is it called, Our Next Energy, and they keep shrinking that one. And the Ford one keeps shrinking. These were not good investments. Most of them were bad return on investment for taxpayers. Some of them were tied to foreign entities that are not our friends. These were bad investments. Imagine if we had dedicated all that money to roads. How much better off we would be. We would have our roads funded. We could have spent that and their $9 billion surplus they all spent last year. We could have spent all that on roads if what they did in government was what they said on the campaign trail, right? On the campaign trail, they said fix the roads. Then they spent a $9 billion surplus without doing it. I'll just say this, we're open to negotiation, we're open to conversation. If Democrats have suggestions on how to bring some of the electric vehicle parts to it, we'll listen to it. For right now, what we're proposing is taking all of the money you pay at the pump and dedicating it to roads, and then dedicating this corporate income tax money to roads. That's what we're proposing.
If I could just expand on that a little bit. You're right on electric vehicles, and there's some proposals that are out there on a mileage fee, on a registration fee, and we're all for, if you use the roads, that you have to pay for that. That's just not part of the plan. It's such a small percentage right now. Miles driven by electric vehicles is 2 or 3%. So I'm not saying it's not important. We're not saying it's not important, part of the plan, but let's get the big piece first. So we're going to address that I just don't think we can get that detailed yet.
You had
Two more
mentioned talking with,
Please.
you had
Go
mentioned talking with Representative Markkinen about
Yeah.
this plan. Have you had, or is there any kind of part of this plan or part of these conversations that make sure this new funding is allocated in a way that, the rest of the districts and counties in the UP will see this funding?
Yeah, it's a great question. Are you from the UP?
Yes, I'm with TV19 out of Marquette.
All right, well, make sure you publish the part where I said that I talked to Rep. Markkinen. I want him to see that, all right? Now, we flipped the percentages in this plan. So, we love, many of us love this Act 51. And the Act 51, I don't have it all in front of me, but essentially it's roughly equal what goes to MDOT, what goes to county roads, and it's done by lane miles. What we're saying is MDOT got their piece the last few years under the billions of dollars that Whitmer bonded. And because of that, of the 1.9 million, or excuse me, the 1.2 billion from the corporate income tax, that'll become 1.7 billion when we expire the SOAR fund next year, that we're going to dedicate that part of it to a new formula, which is weighted more toward those local roads and county roads. And that's where the UP is going to come out very well. I think Rep. Markkinen will be very happy because that was his thing to me is let's look out for the UP. I said, yes, sir, Representative Markkinen. He's a great guy, great advocate for the UP. Do you guys know the percentages back there? No.
You can get that for you.
Yeah, I have it. It's in the press release. I didn't bring the whole press release with me, but it's much better for your local roads. Anything you guys want to add?
Did you had a follow-up question?
Beth asked my question.
She's like that.
Yeah, we'll fight.
She's like that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd love to just piggyback on what we were just talking about, kind of expand on that. When we've been seeing kind of the seeming interest around as there's these more high efficiency vehicles on the roads, switching out the fuel tax, the current fuel tax for a mileage tax. Obviously, you said not part of this plan, could be considered later. I would love to get your perspective on that, your take on that. Would that be something that would be considered as either part of these negotiations or later in the term? Is that something that would be open to negotiation in a Hall House?
Well, Donni Steele's put a marker down, right? No new taxes. So, and we've delegated to her our lead on transportation. So, you see, we work very closely with our caucus members. But I'll say for us, we're open to revenue neutral options moving forward. Certainly, these electric vehicles should pay their fair share, but we're trying to get something done here now, and something that we think is realistic, and that includes making sure all the money that goes to the pump goes to roads, and that schools are held harmless, and that also that we dedicate this corporate income tax revenue to roads, not to big corporations. I mean, you ever thought about that? Like, we collect a corporate income tax from all of them, and then we rededicate it to a select few of them. That's kind of an interesting concept. So everyone can benefit, and even these corporations, they lobby us for better roads. We're just saying, let's pay for that first, and then we can pay for the other stuff with what money's left.
You made it very clear that schools are going to be held harmless here.
That's right.
But with a sales tax on gasoline, that's a constitutional guarantee that they're going to get that revenue. Are you going to be able to offer a similar level of commitment to that they're not going to lose $400-some per pupil if this is shifted?
So I think I've laid out a few ideas, and what I believe is we shouldn't just say we're going to make sure the legislature does it out of the general fund every year, because that fluctuates, right? We're going to dedicate it. So we will find a way to dedicate it to backfill it. And I've given you some of those suggestions.
If there's a hole in school funding, I'll vote no on my own bill. That's where we're dedicated. The team is dedicated. That's not going to happen.
But down the road, you do have term limits, right? And the sales tax on gasoline is something that goes on into the future.
Correct. Well, I mean, I can't tell you what the next generation is going to do, but we're not interested in cutting school funding. That is not going to happen on our watch.
Now, if you want to write stories that we're going to cut the general fund, spending, I mean, I think that's fair, right? I mean, we're going to look, but I've been telling you this the whole time. You go back and look at our campaign. What did the people talk about? You know, what did Ron Robinson talk about at the doors? You know, what did Donni Steele talk about at the doors? You know, and you won by a big margin. But what they said was, we need better return on investment for our tax dollars. We need to invest in local roads and infrastructure, and we're going to look at getting better value for your tax dollars. So the people believe education's important. Remember, we said, I mean, one of the reasons that Nate Shannon lost and Jim Hodsma lost, even though he's an election denier and won't admit it, these guys lost because they cut 92% from school safety funding. That's why they lost, okay? So that's why they lost. We're going to fund education. The people were clear in the election. They support education funding and they support roads funding. But none of these people said they were going to give all the money to corporations. And, you know, I didn't see many of them talk about money for drones and, you know, like I said, boxing rings and splash pads. They didn't talk about that. And they spent billions on that.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Unity. How about that, huh? Great.
I like it. Well done, well done.